Okay, we'll get started. We really have the pleasure and honor of having Misha Doler presenting his vision on how do we go to 6G or the next G. We have known Misha. I've known Misha for a long time. The first time I met him, I was really impressed at one of the videos that he was showing the promise of 5G. Those days, 5G was still not rolled out. With him and your daughter, Risha, playing piano across the continent in Europe, and that was really, really impressive. So, Misha, I think that those days you were still at King's College and professor there, and today he is a very important part of Ericsson, VP of Emerging Technologies there. Thank you, Misha.
All right, we had, I think, a good opening on where we are with 5G, and the rest of the day and tomorrow will be dedicated to 6G. So let me try to give a 10-minute transition on, what is to be expected. And I wanted to start with a slide, to give us some hope, because I wanted to show you that some of the visions just take time. It's like a wine you open, you just have to wait before it's really good. And we had, fantastic ideas maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and some of them didn't make it, but the good ones made it. So clearly, we're using our phones today. Fixed wireless access people have been talking about, even though it was a bit of a surprise hit, I have to say. We have XR now really taken off over the next years. And then something which is very close to my heart is 5G-enabled robotic surgery. Now, I had started that field at King's College in London with my surgeon friends. I got a lot of heat for that because nobody thought this makes any sense, but I knew it did because I worked with the surgeons on that topic. And God is very quick these days. We're making this now real commercial reality. I'm working with the White House, the FDA, FCC, and 200 top surgeons in the US to bring that to market. Very, very exciting. So it takes time. Vision takes time. Now, we are here today. What is coming over the next 10 years? Well, there will be more mobile phones. I think we all agree on that. There will be more XR. We also agree on that. And probably, XR will also be dominated by Gen AI in one way or another. But really, the agent frameworks is something I'm quite excited about. So I'm not sure how many of you follow that, but the ability of not just using one Gen AI, let's say large language model like ChatGPT, you actually have them work together to solve certain tasks for you, whether that is to solve, let's say, pay the fees for the DMV, which is always quite a big of a headache, or handle the subscription for your children at school, or managing, your calendar, etc. These are not trivial tasks, but if you bring, several of these agents together, you can do that. How much traffic will be generated? Well, we don't know. I actually wrote an internal report on that, and believe it or not, within 2 weeks, it was published. It was already obsolete. This is how quickly that field is moving. Now, on the machine side, I personally predict quite an uptake. We had a bit of a difficult road with IoT. We discussed that on the panel, but we have, I think, a lot of stuff coming: ambient IoT, telemetry for cars, automotive industry, but also drones and droids I mentioned before. And it's an exciting area we should pay attention to. Now, we got a problem, though, is that traffic is exploding. And, so far, our predictions, Ericsson has been doing predictions for years and years on end. They have been spot on, if not a little bit conservative. So our prediction is by the end of this decade, before 6G kicks in, we will have a real problem in terms of traffic increase. So we're talking about 3x. This is, not even calculating fixed wireless access. If that really explodes heavily, it's not talking about, XR, Gen AI, drones, etc. This is just our typical MBB and some extra collateral, which is increasing 3x. So how do we make this happen? We clearly need a solution towards the end of the decade. And 6G, I know Rob doesn't like to call it 6G, but 3GPP calls it 6G, so let me call it 6G. 6G is on the horizon. We started working on that. And to complement a little bit John's slide, he had shown you the timeline. I'm going to leave that slide with the organizers and with you, but you can see a little bit more detail what's going on. Now, I will not talk you through all that, but how it typically works is actually, we first look at requirements, and this is happening now in the release 19. 2018 era, which has just started. So we're doing requirements. All the industry comes together, looks at use cases, looks at what academia has been concocting over the last 5, 6, 8 years, and coming up with requirements. Release 20 will then start looking at study items. How can we really translate these requirements into something which could potentially work? And when release 20 is finished, just pay attention. It is actually really coinciding with the ITU World Radio Conference 27, which is when we will know what type of spectrum will be allocated for 6G and not. So there's some purpose that line is drawn. And once we know that technology study items and spectrum availability coincide, we can start developing that, and that will go then in the subsequent releases until we bring it to market towards the end of the decade. That's our grand game plan. And what you can see there is, Rob had a slide saying that spectrum doesn't move in 10-year cycles. It does actually. It's not 10 years as 8 years. So we really need to probably, one thing I personally would like to get changed are these spectrum allocation cycles at ITU levels and national level. If we get that right, then we could actually work in releases, which is not every 10 years, but at least or every month, whatever, like Gen AI, but at least every 18 months, something new can come out. Now, 6Gs are happening, and we had discussed on the panel a little bit what's actually exciting on the way going forward. I just want to show you 2 proof points. My company did, Ericsson proudly, is a lot of stuff we've done in the 6G prototyping era, but 2 of them, Mobile World Congress, on 2 very different ends. So one is really ambient IoT. So we gave MIT what we thought was an impossible task, come up with an IoT solution which consumes 0 joule of energy, 0. Okay, no battery. Can you do that, right? And they did it. And I maintain as long as you pose the right question to the academic world, they will solve it. So I'll leave you with a few questions at the very end of my presentation. But here we are as one proof point. And then we had the other end, pumping gigabits per second of data through a 6G link or a prototype 6G link. And as you can see here, this is the world's first 6G mobile phone. Okay, it doesn't fit yet into my pocket, but we're getting there. Now, what do we need? A few enablers, really. And really, we need to get the fundamentals right. I'm actually not planning to spend any time on this because we have been talking about this for a long time. We'll have a lot of discussions today on various topics there. Just the one thing I want to say is from 5G, we learned that giving too many architecture choices was probably a mistake. We'll see on the long run. But in 6G, we really want to make sure this goes straight to a standalone 6G architecture so we can really leverage on all the great features which will be developed by the ecosystem. What else is happening? And, that is something which I think is really interesting to the US and to actually the West Coast specifically. Some of you know I always talk about the 3 Cs and the 3 As, or the AAA, recharge your 6G with AAA. So the 3 Cs are written here, says cloud, cyber, and chips. And there's a lot of talking about this. And we're in the right place here in San Diego, the cradle of a lot of these developments, really play more and more a huge role in the telco ecosystem, which maybe 5, 10 years ago, nobody really paid attention to. And as we move now forward towards the end of the decade, we end up with the AAAs, which is AI, API, and AR. So AR, the new use case, really bringing in, injecting possibly new monetization opportunities, whether it's enterprise or consumer. API is to make that happen, talking to the flexible fabric. And then we have AI, no need to elaborate further, and we'll have a lot of discussions there. But there's one bottleneck, and that is spectrum. And the spectrum pipeline is very slow. It is, it's very congested. We need to realize that. We have clearly the DoD taking care of national security. We have Wi-Fi providing value as we are, at home and at universities. And we do have licensed services like IMT. So therefore, finding a good balance there is quite a challenge. And the pipeline we know of, or which we estimate shown here, and the interesting bands, and I think Rob has alluded to that, around 3 gig is a lot of, chatter right now. How can we have IMT? So high power a base station coexist with a DoD radar. And as an engineer, we can make it work as long as we know the signatures of both signals. Now, if you ask the DoD, they'll say, we'll not tell you what we transmit, when we transmit, and where we transmit. So it makes it a little bit difficult to really make this work. But solutions are on the horizon, so I'm actually quite hopeful. We're also hoping the 4 gig band will come back. So it's currently not on the US pipeline, it's on the international pipeline. So 4 gig is a really good band for us as well. If you look at at the mid-band, it's the best between Shannon and Maxwell. So from a propagation and from a capacity point of view, superb band. And the one band which, of course, everybody talks about is the 7 gig band, 7 to 8 gig. And it looks like a promising band, but I think we will hit a lot of problems in coexistence, not necessarily with the terrestrial services, but actually what's happening in space. So we somehow need to work out how that coexistence works out, right? So pipeline is here. I'll leave these slides with you. You can look at it. I actually gave an NTIA FCC tutorial at Diceband the other day. So I have 200 slides on Spectrum. Anybody interested, you just email me and I'll send it to you. Let me close on the challenges. So I could have come up with probably hundreds of 6G challenges just simply from the conversations of last week within Ericsson. But I want to just hone in maybe on the Spectrum challenges, and I cannot re-emphasize the importance of that. We really would like all the great things you guys develop in the in the W and D band, so the sub-gig band, the sub-terahertz band, as well as in the FR2 band, which is the millimeter wave band. Would love this to work in the mid-band, because the mid-band spectrum pipeline is coming. Whatever you do up there, whether this is AI, new transceivers, etc., make it work, please, in FR2 in FR3 and FR1 if possible, because that's where the sweet spot is at the moment. Yeah. And the second thing, really, start thinking about much wider transceivers. Transceivers potentially have a non-contiguous type of arrangement as we start bringing together carrier aggregation, component carriers from FR1 and FR3, so the below 6 gig and from 6 gig to 15 gig. How do you make that work, really? How do you make it work from a transceiver, power amplifier point of view? And the last one, which maybe is the most important one, is how can you enable coexistence with a high power, IMT system? So sharing by design is coming. I think we all agree on this. You can't just move out a satellite. You can't move out the DoD. We need to coexist in one way or another. But, if you talk to Kerry, talk to Rob, they will tell you, it's a great idea to have low power level coexistence, but from a business model point of view, it will not fly. So therefore, please make sure high power, how can we coexist? And a lot of people say mission impossible. I have a lot of faith in you, a lot of academic, very smart people here. So please solve that. If you could do this quickly by the end of the summer, it would be fine. But within a year or two is also good. I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.